Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon. I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and welcome to vlog 149. Respect now, always. Now, this is a very serious vlog, this one. It's politically important, it's socially important, it's intellectually important. And I have the great privilege of talking with one of the truly brilliant people in my life, Ashley Merrill. Ashley is a friend of mine. She's also a remarkable colleague. She is the head of our progressions team at Flinders University, and she's worked in universities around the country, multiple states, and also through multiple industries, including law. Now, we are dealing with sexual assault and sexual harassment this week. So this is a big week. It's an important week. It's a controversial week. And this week and what we talk about might make you feel uncomfortable. You can certainly disagree with us, and we're presenting this dialogue and debate for you to agree and disagree. But what we're trying to do is provoke thought. And so Ash and I have been thinking about this vlog, wow, for 18 months or so. And I'll tell you how we got here. In 2016, there was a survey of Australian university students conducted to assess the levels of sexual assault and sexual harassment in Australian universities. And the resultant report was released by the Human Rights Commission on August the 1st, 2017, with the title, Respect Now, Always. So this report demonstrated some very disturbing trends both in undergraduate and postgraduate education between students and staff, but also on university facilities and indeed in places like public transport and so forth. Now, PhD students were a very small part of this survey, and the numbers are always unclear, but let me just state clearly, one case of sexual assault or sexual harassment of a PhD student is one case too many. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, Ashley, on behalf of the Office of Graduate Research in Flinders University, attended specialist training last year and an information session so that the Australian universities do handle this properly. And so Ashley is going to share her expertise and what she learnt from that training with us today. So we're going to talk about this topic carefully, with as much dignity and care and respect as we can, because also Ash and I are both aware there are people watching this video around the world who right now, today, are confronting this, are confronting sexual assault and confronting sexual harassment. So we are with you, and we just want to open this topic out for conversation. You're free to disagree with us, but let's talk about it. So in August 2018, the Australian Council for Graduate Research released their principles for respectful supervisory relationships. So we now have a framework to have this conversation. So let's do this. And Ash, thank you so much for joining me. I know it's a
Thank you for having me.
I know it's a complicated topic, and this woman is just simply remarkable. And I can think of nobody I would prefer to go through this really complicated story with but you. So thank you for all the work that you've done. So if I can, Ash, let's start with the difficult first question. The relationship between supervisors and students is really close. We're recording this in my office, and my door is closed, and you can see the intimacy of an academic office. So a lot of that relationship is conducted behind closed doors. So why does this relationship between a supervisor and a student sometimes move into a romantic relationship?
Well, I think the key thing is that closeness and the amount of time that you spend together. So, a PhD is typically 3 to 4 years. That's a long time to spend with the same person day in, day out.
Yeah.
And also, you're both passionate about the same subject matter. It's just one of those things that can evolve into a romantic relationship.
Because a lot of relationships, like I'm talking about sexual romantic relationships in our lives outside of universities, don't last 3 years. So you've got a weekly meeting with someone, and I love your point about you share a lot, and that can perhaps be a proxy for sharing more. Is that what you're suggesting?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Which can be a bit dangerous, because then that crosses and blurs the lines between personal and professional
relationships. And that's, I think, where we're going to go today if we can. We're going to really talk about how we separate those components out. So let's now, if we can, Ash, talk about the power imbalance in a relationship such as this. And I'm going to quote, if I can, I'm going to quote this overtly. So this is the Principles for Respectful Supervision that comes from the Australian Council for Graduate Research. So this is the deal, this is the framework, these are the guidelines in which we are now going to work at Flinders University. And in this principles document, and I'll read the quote, "A sexual or romantic relationship between a supervisor and a student is never appropriate." Just remember that phrase, never appropriate. "Staff who engage in a sexual relationship with a student harm the learning and research environment of that student and other students. Such a relationship also compromises the academic integrity of all parties, including the university," end of quote. So Ash, amazing phrases there, never appropriate and compromises academic integrity. So that's incredibly staunch, because if we just deal with the law, you know, we're dealing with an adult relationship, a supervisor and a student, they're both adults, you'd think they could consent. But by these guidelines, they're stating it is never appropriate. So it is staunch. Are they right to be that staunch?
Absolutely.
Right.
Because even though it's a matter of two adults consenting, there's a massive power imbalance. So it can't be pure consent.
Right, so because of the power imbalance, Ash, so what is the student consenting to? Is that the issue?
That's right.
Do they ever actually know?
Probably not, because they're, you know, and it will impact on objectivity and progress and engagement. If it all goes wrong, it'll go wrong in a big way.
Yeah.
And it's not just the relationship that's happening between the student and the supervisor, but it's also the relationship between other colleagues and students in the team.
Because they'll know, won't they? The other students in the lab
yeah.
or in the team will know that that's occurring.
Of course, yeah. And also can impact on engagement in terms of the student being able to go, okay, I can deal with this emotionally, but I now have to focus on the work to be done.
And so it gets all a bit messy. That's the argument Ash is making. It gets really, really messy.
Yeah.
And also, I'll say the line. I know a lot of supervisors watch this vlog as well, Ash. And, you know, I'll be avert because we are talking about sex and sexuality. We can't clean this up. I always say, you know, if you think about young men or young women, because of course this is straight and gay, this is old and young, it's not about sexuality, it's not about age. But could a student ever actually consent to me as a supervisor? Because our students, with the greatest respect to you guys, you're not seeing an actual person. You're seeing a supervisor, there may be a bit of an aura there, you might be seeing and falling for the power. So as I often say, you see the supervisor, you supposedly fall in love with the supervisor, but you wake up the next morning with a woman. And there are differences there, and the power imbalance, I think, blocks you from that comprehension. Again, have I been too harsh there?
No, definitely not.
You know, I mean, what are you actually having sex with? And when you're having sex with a supervisor, that supervisor is not actually a man or a woman. There's something different about that role. And the ACGR, the Australian Council for Graduate Research, have taken that really seriously, I think. So the interesting point about the principles that we are going to implement at Flinders University, Ash, is they recommend that if a sexual or romantic relationship emerges, so happens, between the supervisor and the student, that the supervisor be immediately removed from the panel. So they're gone. So you have sex, it's over, it's gone. So why is that recommended?
Because the relationship can get really complicated really quickly, and the student may not, or supervisor, may not feel that they're in a position to say no. So the longer that goes on, you know, psychologically, you know, there's a number of effects that is not just going to be related to that part of the relationship or the relationship breaking down or continuing. It's a massive impact on the research, on the thesis, student health and well-being, as well as the team well-being, and especially in terms of labs.
So it's going to bleed beyond the
correct.
socio-sexual relationship to impact everything else. Also, of course, we haven't even talked about it. What happens if it breaks up?
disastrous.
And obviously we've seen that nationally and internationally. When a breakup occurs, and again I'll just quickly tell the story, when I was a student there was a supervisor, obviously different time, dinosaurs roamed the earth, but a supervisor was having sex with the student broke up. It was an older gentleman, younger female student. The supervisor was broken up with, so he was dumped, you're dumped. And he made that woman's life an absolute hell, would not write her references. She had to leave the university, leave the candidature. She lost control of her publications. It took her 15 years to recover in her career because she just went, well, thank you very much, it's been great, but I think now we just go back to the supervisory relationship. And he could not deal with that. And I would argue in many ways, you probably can't go backwards.
No. Once it's done, it's done.
And you can sort of pretend you're adults and grown-ups and stuff, but once you've had sex with somebody, you've had sex with somebody. And you think about your own life, it's like outside of universities, having friendships and so forth, and all those how do you handle that? And you've got to compartmentalise, but it gets complex. You add a PhD to this story, what a disaster.
That's right, and then career direction and career opportunities on top of that.
Yeah, because that's the point. So what can go wrong in this relationship? So I want to talk about that. So,
Sure.
So career opportunities can go wrong. What does that look like, Ash? So what happens?
All right, so usually most supervisors have their networks outside of the university, and they're going to be your references. So if they've got connections, they've got friends that you're applying for jobs in different industries, different universities, they're going to know people. And especially being high profile, they're going to talk, they're going to go, oh yeah, depending on what they talk about is going to be key to what happens next, what happens life after your PhD.
And I mean, we all, I think, know where that's going. I sort of got a bit of a chill there when Ash said that. So, this is not going to end well. And this is about the personal and professional separation.
Definitely.
It's not about heterosexuality or homosexuality or ages. It's just about ethical, professional relationships and behaviours, isn't it?
And conduct.
And conduct. That's why you're here. So, obviously, you're involved. You're a head of progression. So it's really the biggest job in the Office of Graduate Research that you have. So from admissions right the way through to the point you do an examination, Ash runs your cases. So why is it important for students, and particularly students' progress, which is why Ash is here and has leadership in this area, that the expectations, the roles and the responsibilities for students and supervisors are really clear? Why is it important to students' progress?
Because ambiguity and blurred lines in terms of professionalism can just be disastrous. So we have had cases where this has occurred, and students have had to take intermission because they haven't been able to focus on their research. They end up massively over time and having to apply for extensions. They end up on health and counselling's doorstep quite a lot. And yeah, so, if you're planning to go, yep, cool, I'm going to have my PhD done in 3 to 4 years, it's going to have an impact. Yeah. Especially if you're relying on your supervisor to provide feedback. If something's gone wrong there, you're probably not going to get feedback timely, if at all. Yeah. And that will massively delay your life ultimately, because you're going to need your PhD to go on to the next. Really
well said. And guys and girls, that's why last year, we knew this was coming obviously. Last year, Flinders University was really the first university in the country to put in place this very clear supervisory and student charter. So if you put Flinders University, supervisory charter up, this will come. So this is on the web. And so what we really recommend for students, all students, wherever you are in your progression, if you're just starting, print that out and take that to meeting number 1, and it very clearly lists those roles, doesn't it? So would you do this right at the start? So let's talk about how this operates.
Yeah, I reckon day 1 of your candidature, have a meeting with your supervisor, whole supervisory panel, because Yeah. Yeah, and just go, okay, from the get-go, this is what the next couple of years, 3 to 4 years of my life is going to look like.
Would you, and this is just a woman-to-woman conversation, Ash, would you raise it overtly? Would you say, so this is about a professional relationship, this is the student saying these are my expectations, this is who I am, noting that we've often talked about the average age of our students that start is 36, so these are adult men and women. So, you are an adult, you've got all this life experience, but would you actually say, look, this is the sort of professional relationship and support I require?
Definitely. Especially because there are some areas where it's a normalised culture. And this is just the done thing, and it really isn't. And this really should not be like considered as normal.
Can we just unpack that just a little bit? Because I just got chills there as well. So in some disciplines, in some paradigms, in some universities, the idea that sort of the socio-sexual relationship, the blurring of lines, is quite common. So therefore students don't even know that, you know, they could actually separate themselves from it.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I would be, you know, I've talked about this with you guys before. What I would do is none of my students have my home address. None of my students have my mobile phone number. I adore my students. I care for them desperately. But I'm very, very clear about boundaries. So maybe, you know, this year going forward when we're implementing these principles, being overt
Definitely.
in the discussion of those boundaries is important.
Definitely.
Right, let's get harder if we can. There are nodes of incredible challenge, I think, in these professional relationships when things get really, really, do we say sticky? We probably do, between students and supervisors. So when supervisors and students go to conferences, or there's field work involved, or remote visits that we see a lot, and particularly in clinical areas. So how do we manage these difficult contexts where students and supervisors are away from their normal day-to-day behaviour and socialisation and practice and home? So are they particular danger points?
They are a bit, and I think both students and supervisors need to be aware that there is, you know, the potential for, you know, things to go further than would probably be appropriate, especially after a couple of drinks or, you know, social gatherings and away from home. But ultimately it shouldn't matter whether you're on campus or you're not. Like it should be the same level of professionalism.
And can I be staunch on that? So, of course, the argument would be, you know, when in doubt, blame the victim. Oh, well, if you're a student, you know, don't have 3 or 4 drinks at a conference. And actually, that's blaming the victim. You're an adult. If you want to get drunk and fall over, that's your business. It is then, I think, about the supervisor understanding the boundaries and parameters. That, you know, if somebody is drunk, that has no impact at all on the decisions that you as a supervisor make. Is that fair enough?
Definitely.
'Cause I mean,
and even if you've discussed those boundaries already,
then you
that's
go
already
anywhere.
what the guidelines are.
Then you can go
That's
anywhere.
it.
You can do field work, you can do remote work, you can go to a conference, you can have 2 bowls of wine and sleep yourself in a lounge suite at a conference. None of that matters, but be aware of those nodes and maybe discuss them early too.
Definitely.
That, you know, the game isn't different, the rules aren't off.
That's right. And you know, separate hotel rooms.
I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Right, so let's get to the institutional one. See how great she is. Let's get to the institutional one if we can. So how can we as a university ensure that you as our students are safe? So I use the phrase culturally safe a lot and I mean it. So how can we as the OGR at Flinders enable the cultural safety of our students? What can we do?
Okay, so every OGR staff member has been Yarrow Place trained. So we're completely across the process from when you feel comfortable to disclose as to whatever outcome and result that you want. The important thing is that we are more than anyone that you feel comfortable disclosing to in the OGR. Our door is always open and we are more than willing to help in whatever way we can. Whatever you do disclose will be strictly confidential and your privacy respected, and whatever happens after that is completely in your control.
Yeah, so all of us have been trained. We should actually say for our international viewers too what Yarrow Place is.
Okay, so Yarrow Place is the sexual assault and sexual harassment clinic.
Clinic?
Yeah, clinic that's based in Adelaide CBD, and they do, you know, the whole bit from like forensic testing, police involvement, that sort of thing.
And so all of us in the Office of Graduate Research, every single staff member from the senior staff like Ash and myself, right the way through to our more junior administrators, every single person has been trained is, okay, so this person declares, this person presents, walks through your door and trained, this is what we go through for you, okay? So you are not on your own. Get yourself culturally safe. If you have to just walk into the OGR, you walk into the OGR, and every single person you talk to has been trained and will care for you on your terms. So if you just want to tell somebody and have it not go any further and maybe get some support, we can do that for you.
That's right, and we can come up with strategies for you as well.
Yeah, because literally progression. So if you want a different supervisor, That can be
We'll sort
organised
it.
for you. We'll sort it.
it.
Okay. Last question, Ash, and thank you so much for this because it is such a difficult conversation. I feel all a bit pins and needles myself. It's a bit weird, but I'm glad we're having it, and I would follow you through hell, madam. So the final question is, why does this matter so much? Why have we taken you and I 18 months of talking and conversations to get ourselves to this gig today in front of a camera? Why does it matter?
Because university should be a safe space, and it should be working in your best interests to develop professionally and personally, and you shouldn't have to go through this.
Yeah.
And we want you to succeed and do your best without having, like, you know, doing a HDR is stressful enough as it is, without additional...
Yeah. We want you safe, we want you well, we want you succeeding, we want you happy if we can, and we want you to feel like you've got control of your own life and your own destiny and your own body, because this is about your body and body management, and we care about you as a whole person. And certainly Ashley, everything Ash does and her wonderful team and progressions, it's all about your progress. It's in the name. And part of that progress is making sure you're safe emotionally, intellectually, personally and professionally. And that's what we do. Ash, thank you so much for this. You are a wonderful human being. And Ash and I wish you love, light and peace. We're out. Cheers.